It's always the end of November, 1st of December. And I listened to Dr. Erin Hodgson speak earlier. She's the entomologist here at Iowa State. And you talked a lot about direct injury from insects. Do you want to expand on that for the group?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. I spent a mini session, so just 25 minutes, focusing on explaining more about direct injury to field crops. And I decided to talk about this because I'm seeing more late season pest activity in corn and soybean. So just gave some tips on how to identify direct injury, because sometimes you don't see the insects, but with in field crops you definitely notice it on the ear or the developing pod. So just explaining what direct injury is and how important it is, because it's irreversible. So once you have damage to the ear, the kernels, the seeds or pods, you can't go back. And so it's usually timely scouting and a short treatment window to take action to protect yield. So we went over some of the basics on how to recognize it, some scouting tips, and then the last few minutes, I talked really fast, was just talking about making some profitable management decisions. And usually there's a pretty low tolerance or threshold for those insects that directly attack the ears and the pods. And so we just reviewed that, just making sure everybody knew some of the terminology that goes along with scouting and management for insects. And then just kind of wrapped it up by talking about some spraying guidelines if you do decide to take some action, some pointers on making the most of your time and money.
Dr. Hudson, I thought that was very interesting. You talked about soybeans can actually handle a certain amount of threshold with insect feeding. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, there are some pests and some crops where you can have a linear response. The more pests you have, it directly translates into linear yield losses. But there are some crops like soybean that actually perform a little bit better when you have some insect feeding going on. So initially you can have a higher yield response because the plant is triggering itself for protection. And so you actually get a bit higher yield compared to when you don't have any insects present. So and the nature of soybean is to be, it compensates, so it fills in the gaps within and between rows, and especially in the vegetative stage, they can put on a lot of foliage. And so depending on the genetics of the soybean, they put on laterals, or they can grow, filling in those gaps. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing to have a little bit of pest activity, but then at some point it just will quickly decline. So it's something to keep your eye out for. Is a little's okay, a lot not okay.
So in-season scouting is always key. As you're scouting this summer, is there anything that really sticks out in your mind as we prepare for 2023?
Yeah, there was a lot of late planted fields or delayed planted fields because of the spring soil conditions. And then the drought seemed to exacerbate some of the stress that plants were experiencing. So late season feeders, we had grasshoppers that I think about in drought, some spider mites. And then also we had corn earworm and then bean leaf beetle actually late in the season, causing direct injury to the ears or the pods. And so people are considering spraying in late August or early September because they're noticing that direct injury. But some of the options for spraying at that time become limited because of the pre-harvest season. Yeah, and so you want to make sure you're checking the label so that the spray isn't interfering with your harvest schedule.
Right, you get within that month's schedule of harvest, and that really limits your options.
Yeah, some of them are 60 days.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. If you ever get a chance to listen to her speak, I encourage you to do that. She's a great speaker. So thank you, and hope you have a good day today.
Stay in the know with Liqui-Grow.